In the past, we had done like the all-female art show, and we were talking about how we wanted to take the project a step further and not only celebrating female art, but making it more a social project to where it had more of an impact. And the writing project, I wanted it to be a collection of all different kinds of writings and stories from mothers and daughters. That way it included, different generations. And we were just tossing names and ideas around and kind of joking about it, actually. And Claudio was like, pues somos hijas de nuestras mamás. And I'm like, ay, hijas de su madre. And we started laughing about it because it has such a strong notation to it, and in particular in Mexican culture, especially around here, a very negative connotation. And even in talking about it with my grandma, she's to this day, caray, whenever I tell her the name of our organization or our project. We are daughters of our mothers, so we found it very fitting and appropriate. And we hope that it does catch attention so that people will participate and want to help join the movement.
I guess for me, hearing that term was something my dad would always, joke with us, call us, whether he was joking or maybe even upset. So it's been used as an insult or a joke for so long. We just have to remember where we come from and take pride in being our mother's child and our father's.
Important that we know our moms, because then we understand why she raised us the way that she did, and it helps us heal and be able to mutually help and respect them and support them, and to help break cycles of that were negative. I mean, everybody's situation is different, but being aware and having understanding is I think one of the first big huge steps in making a change.
We know about our mothers as our mothers. We don't know them as just people. And so I just started to really examine my mom's life and what she had been exposed to and what my grandmother had to go through. And it kind of just started to make sense the way I was. And that never ever made sense until I started to question, where do I fit in this framework, in the patchwork of things and our family and our history, and what is that? So,
and helping people to tell their story so that others can also heal and identify with it and, open up on their own and share and continue that cycle of healing and mutual understanding and acceptance.
We don't come from a place where we can talk about things. And I think that's where all of our vices come into play, because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt put on us generation to generation, men and women living these lives that to a certain extent we're forced to live, and we don't know how, we don't want to, we just don't talk about a lot of things. And it does make it kind of hard, and I think that more and more and more nowadays people are kind of understanding that, and a lot of people are just stopping, they're pulling back, they're being more consciously aware of how we were raised, how our parents were raised, how our grandparents were raised. My sister always says, Mom, let's talk about when I was younger, and let's talk about this. And no, it's in the past. It's over. It's done. Everybody's fine. We're okay. We're all grown up. And it's like, yeah, but we still have these feelings. And it's not that we want to say, well, you did this to me, or because of you I'm like this, or why did you do that? It's not about that. It's about wanting to share. It's about wanting to say, hey, did this happen? Is this a bad memory I have? Did this really go on? You know, we block so many things out. We make a version of an incident more than what it really was because we didn't hear the other side of the story.
Have you ever read All About Love by Bell Hooks?
No.
Okay, you need to read that book because she talks about what love is and how it's so hard for us because of what we've been taught about love to point out the discrepancies in our childhood. Like, our parents are amazing and things went down that should have not gone down. That's not making nobody wrong, nothing, but we, because of what we believe is love and what we've been taught is love, we're afraid to say, yo, that was messed up, actually. And there was some shit you did to me. And certain things about your life affected me in X, Y, and Z way. No foul, no harm. Like, I'm coming to peace with those things. I'm just gonna let you know. And then you're not being a brat. You're just speaking the truth. Like, there are some things that because we come from a formerly enslaved but still enslaved mentally people, there's people hurt other people. And so our parents hurt us. We've hurt other people too. Like, your parents and your relationship with your parent is not exempt of pain. It's not going to be the most perfect relationship. Some are worse than others, but there are things that, you know, we've been raised to be afraid to be like, mommy, that was not okay. And so we make ourselves responsible for it and turn it around to some craziness of like how it's just us. And it's not.
Porque nadie me dijo, nadie, nomás me cuidaban y me decían que me cuidara, que mucho cuidado, que no me metiera en las casas solas y donde hubiera hombres, que no me fuera a meter y allá en los ranchos pues se conoce uno todos. Y cuando vine acá al Paso, pues mi tía con la persona que yo vivía tampoco me dijo tanto. Así es que yo no supe mucho hasta que con la vida aprende uno. Aprende de lo que es una mujer y de lo que tiene uno. Empecé a ir al doctor con ginecólogo y todo. Y ya empecé a aprender de todo. De toda la higiene, de todo lo como una mujer se tiene que cuidar.
My father to this day blames my grandfather for being the way he is.
And your grandfather's been gone how long?
And yeah, my grandfather's been gone 20 years now. I recall so many nights staying up with him until 3, 4 in the morning, hearing the same stories. Not, you know, as I got older and I was able to speak up more, I would tell him, let him know you're doing the same thing to me. You know, you're keeping me up this late. I'm hearing the same stories. But, you know, I feel very blessed or saved once again, that art and literature, you know, reading and writing is what kept me sane.
That in-between place of like learning to decolonize your life and family patterns, you know, like it applies to a lot of the work that I do. I work with food and I work with wellness, and I'm pregnant right now and thinking a lot about where I am. And so I think that I always go back to like the conquest. So I feel like the conquest brought us a lot of shame, and inferiority complexes. And it applies to everything from food to sexuality to birthing. So, for example, I always talk about amaranto because it was a food that became illegal during the conquest. It was illegal to plant it. And it was one of the main staples of people's diet, like corn and beans, squash, chile, tomato. Chia and amaranth were like that common every day in our table. People grew it in their gardens. People knew how to use it, what parts of the plant, how to harvest the seeds, how to eat the leaves, everything. But it was made illegal during the conquest because chia and amaranth were the main foods of the warrior class. So it was part of the military strategy to weaken the warrior class. And they're like considered superfoods now, right? What we call superfoods now. Really high in protein, omega-3s, chia is. Amaranth is really high. It's got more calcium than cow's milk. It's very high in protein. And it's really easy to prepare and to carry, like if you're going to go out in the field or on a journey. And so is chia. So the penalty was mutilation or death if you were caught cultivating amaranth. So mutilation meaning they would cut off your hand. So people stopped growing it, and grandmothers stopped cooking with it and stopped teaching their children how to use it, and so I think that's very symbolic. So we forgot how to use it and what treasures we have in our own yards. And so part of what I like to teach in my food classes, in my work with food, more than classes, it's like a reconnection with our foods and our stories around foods, and a reclaiming of what the wisdom that we already had and the practices that we already had. Like, you hear a lot about kombucha and fermented foods, and our people were doing that already too in different regions in different ways, like Tezuino in Chihuahua or Tepache. My first experiences with food were with my grandmother. She loved food so much. She had 2 kitchens and an outdoor cooking area, because she grew up cooking outdoors with wood and big, huge ollas, big, huge comales, cooking for like 20 people. I mean, just cooking for a big family that she had. So when she and my grandfather built their house, she built this outdoor cooking area and like a space to store wood, and her approach to food was from a devotional perspective. So she would, for example, hold a tomato and she would say, look at this, look how beautiful this is. And she would like kiss the tomato, and tell me like, look at the color and see how it smells. And so I think I learned to love food. And that connection to food is more powerful than like knowing the nutritional qualities of the food, or how much vitamin A or how much protein something has, to appreciate the beauty of nature and how it nourishes us. So my family always ate really fresh and really traditional foods. My grandmother cooked really traditional foods like guauzontles, and she made different kinds of moles, and was always there were always seeds drying somewhere on the table or in the kitchen, or like a little bouquet of edible greens called papalos, or different kinds of just food was always present, foods and seeds and smells, in a big clay pot with beans on the stove. I remember I was in an ESL program in 3rd grade, and like for good grades we would get coupons to McDonald's or like a free Happy Meal, because you got A's. So we started relying more on convenience foods. My mom still cooks really fresh, but there were some changes, like Spam and new foods like that. And again, like the culture of going to fast food restaurants because it's an American thing to do, and it's you've made it, you've made it to the other side. And
we have a Native American background on my maternal grandmother's side, and so just collectively, like, family members, we're consistently passing down recipes and remedies, and recipes that are remedies and such. And one of my favorite things that my mom does is she grows plants. She has a really good green thumb. So it can be anywhere from nopales to chile, pomegranates, and even if we go to the grocery store, we'll pick out the seeds and say, let's see what we can grow. Let's not, we don't worry about if we're saving money or not. Let's just see if we can, grow some more food in the yard, and it's just beautiful. I'll see my grandmother just, sticking in the garlic cloves, because when we buy them, they have a little green plant already growing. So she's like, hey, there's a little piece of gold, so let's grow some more.
Native people didn't fry food, they didn't use oils for frying. They would use oils for cold, like for dressings, or like peanut oil, chia oil. So we weren't frying foods. We didn't have beef. We didn't have dairy. And now when people think of Mexican food, they think like it's fried and greasy and a lot of meat and a lot of cheese. And traditionally it wasn't like that. It's like a lot of seeds, a lot of greens, a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of different kinds of beans, mainly like plant foods, occasionally some small animals like fish or turkey or duck or insects. And then the cooking methods, grilling, steaming, roasting, very healthy. So for me, that's the other piece, because when you get colonized, it's such a gradual process, and you think you have a choice. You think, look at all these cereals in the cereal aisle, and it's really a false sense of choice. And somebody's making decisions behind the scenes that make that apparent spread possible, So maybe people back in the day were like, oh, well, we can eat beef now, and we can do, it was like a false sense of choice. Somebody had made it illegal to plant this other kind of food, but you can have this, and you can fry this, And now it's the same. It's like, well, you don't want to, you don't want to get organic. It's too expensive, but you can have the dollar menu. Look at all the choices on it, We have to be very vigilant about how our daily choices are impacting our future generations, and not try not to act out of just convenience, like what's easy in the moment. I think that's part of the decolonizing, just being thoughtful about those everyday decisions, and choosing wellness that's rooted in in our culture and who we are. Because I think that way it becomes, it's not a fad, it's not a trend, it's rooted in who you are, in your lineage, and in who you want to be for people that are coming after you, So it's more like a sense of responsibility for our future generations than just because I want to fit into my wedding dress or I want to look cute for some boy, It's like, no, this is what I'm doing because this is who I am, and that's not gonna go away when a new trend comes. It's just, kind of, that's you.
The workshop that we did on sexual violence, I found it an important issue to discuss at a community level. One, because it happens. The other, because incest and rape have become almost the norm in certain circles, where violence is accepted, where violence is promoted. Almost become the norm in certain circles to use women as objects of violence, and for children to learn that at a very early age, and I find that very dysfunctional. For a society to promote that for the sake of profit, supposedly, I find that to be a destructive way, of impacting the society. And we have to consciously do creative work that not balances that, because we don't need that at all, but really replaces that in the minds of in the education of children especially, and then of women as well, because we have women, as women we have been conditioned to accept that as the norm. And so the workshop itself, I found to be very effective, and with Hijas de su Madre Project, bringing these issues to the community, I find that to be a very effective way of raising awareness.
When my grandmother was a young lady, she went on a date with a man who took advantage of her and impregnated her. Her family then forced her to get married to that same man. So throughout her life, she struggled with conveying a healthy message about sexuality to my mother and her siblings. I believe what happened to my grandmother caused her to feel a lot of shame. She passed that feeling on to the rest of her children. My mother, she was honest with me about how my body was going to change and how I was going to feel and look different. I was always kind of scared when she told me about it because it seemed like a secret, and I wasn't supposed to tell anyone what was going on. I had a hard time accepting that I was going to have a period or I would develop breasts, and that people were going to find me sexually attractive, and how to handle sexual harassment without feeling horrible and humiliated about it. Oftentimes in church, I was told that a woman must dress modestly and, that we didn't want to tempt the opposite sex in any way, and that just caused more shame about my body. It was like it was a tool of sin. In the future, I hope to raise my sons and daughters with a healthy knowledge of what it means to be sexual and how to view their bodies in a healthy manner. I want to break the cycle of shame that was put on my family for so long.
gritty dirt, salty tears, tortured screams echo deep in the heart. You ask, what is sexual assault?
I peel his arms off my small breasts, run outside naked to lay my body against the cold dirt, and I don't even mind the weeds. I cry for all the men who abandoned me, the mothers who can't bear looking at my face because I have his eyes.
Her stomach convulsed in spasm while she forced herself to stay, her arms becoming leaden when he would pull her on top of him, her body a dead weight, lifeless, as she learned how to be a woman, dueling with a tongue that didn't belong in her mouth. She must have aged 10 years every time they played until actions became routine. The young, reluctant wife, a lost appetite, her bile digesting her innocence. She has felt tainted ever since.
From grass, it's a pause and a hesitation. From force to manipulation, it's a trigger. It's a warning. It's caught up in a whirlwind between the sound and the storming. It's being lost. Salt on this earth, broken chains and unnecessary walls. It's the blind leading the blind, and an easy proliferation of a culture where boys will be boys and people are less meaningful than money. It's a murderous metronome that ticks away the time and
Insane aggression masquerading as lust. The perversion of intimacy by familiar assailants. A destructive weapon of war. How do we survive? Spirit rises, stops everything, uplifts the soul to a peaceful place in the higher mind to heal and take action. Stop sexual violence. Stop sexual violence. Stop sexual violence.
So the Hijas de su Madre Project really wanted to focus on how HIV and STDs affect women and really get the education needed to inform women and empower women to take control of their health. So the project collaborated with University Medical Center. They have a women's health department that incorporates community education with their services. So we were able to get a free service through University Medical Center. They provided 2 amazing educators who came out and to our group of women, and we just sat down and talked about HIV and STDs, and our participants were very interested and even expressed that they wanted more information. As an HIV prevention educator, I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people in a range of ages. And when I did some more research about HIV, to find current statistics and make class more interesting with more information, I began to realize that a lot of my sources were telling me that women were at higher risk for contracting HIV and other STDs because of our, pretty much because the vagina is an open tissue that provides a gateway, a very easy gateway for disease to pass through. And I thought, why aren't I telling the women this? Because they need to know. They need to know that. Because it's not just, oh, this is going to happen once, and not what are the chances? Or I love him and I don't care. It became my priority to inform women about their rights, to demand that they're protected.
It was some girls that I was working with at Irvin High School in the Northeast, and they were just constantly talking about sex, and a lot of them had already lost their virginities and were only like 14, 15 years old, some of them, and they just were constantly looking for information and talking about it, and how also they would party on the weekends and doing ecstasy. And so I took them to Texas A&M Prevention with Miss Susan Hurt. She was this lady that I worked with whenever I needed to give presentations to youth. It really was an eye-opener for them a lot of times. That particular group, I remember one girl who, she was already a senior and she was 17 and a half, and just talking on and on about how she was so ready, and she was, you know, the next opportunity that she had, she was gonna take advantage and do it, and she was, you know, just wanted to get it over with already. And so after talking during that class, I remember she just like started pursing her lips and like shaking her head over and over and over again. She was like, never, I'm never doing it. I can't believe how risky it is and how dangerous. And I was just like, you see.
For me, alcoholism is a disease. And it's a disease that not only affects the individual, but the entire family, ¿verdad? And including extended family. The use of alcohol is promoted on a daily basis. And so we're being bombarded by this, and so it's no surprise that that alcoholism continues to be a problem. In the end result is a lot of illness, a lot of mental illness. Addiction is a mental illness where we begin to depend on a substance in order to deal with pain, in order to deal with issues that come up in our families. And everybody seems to think it's okay if it's a quinceañera. Everybody seems to think it's okay if it's a wedding. Everybody should drink. Everybody must drink. Everybody must indulge in the drugs. Angry that at 10 years old, I had my first blackout. I find that very distressing because there was definitely child abuse there. There was child neglect, and I'm not the only one. And so the anger that I feel, I channel it to inform and to prevent myself from falling back into that. Because no 10-year-old child should be dealing with the after effects or just the use of alcohol or the after effects of having had a loss of consciousness.
So I've always had a connection with it, with alcohol being a part of everyday life events, from the most special to the hardest times in our lives. I've always grown up surrounded by the arts. I'm a third-generation jeweler, artisan, and it's something that has been a big part of my family's lives, you know, from them being metalsmith to the women being craft women and bakers and, you know, cooks. We're a family of cooks. Early on, my grandfather, you know, started passing down the trade of jewelry making. My father recalls being a jeweler since the age of 13. You know, he started early on, made that his career to this day. There was always either fashion design magazines laying around, or they both really liked to read about history, culture, and National Geographics. So early on, I would pick up these magazines, and I became inspired. I wanted to learn more about cultures. I wanted to learn more about history. Being his own boss, being a jeweler, he was able to live a different lifestyle that maybe many other young men his age didn't have the luxury of living. He was making his own money, he was independent, he was running a business with his father. He fell into addiction early on. At an early age, I believe he was about 17 years old, 18. He had a car accident. He had two really bad car accidents where he almost lost his life due to drinking and driving. And from there, it evolved to harder substances that in the end didn't only end up affecting his life, but it ended up affecting my family's life, our lifestyle. I've always said and felt that I've always been an alcoholic. Because I've been forced at times to live the life of an alcoholic, and other times you could say I've chosen to also follow in some of these patterns of alcoholism. My father's illness, I would like to say, it took me a very hard time, and it still does, to understand. I had to probably grow up and a lot quicker than most. I grew up feeling a lot of shame and embarrassment and all these really sad emotions that I just recall, going to bed at night wondering if my schoolmates were gonna know what happened.
I think for me, this project, the Message in the Bottle project, came really naturally in that alcohol has always played a huge role in my life since I was born, really. My father was very young and thought he was invincible. I've come to terms with that now as an adult, and he was a party animal and just really enjoyed life, and got married young also to my mom, and they had me. He hurt my mom a lot. I think for me it's been a little bit easy to forgive because I was so little when he passed away that I really didn't have a chance to even, I don't remember a lot of him. I don't remember any of him really, other than pictures and what people tell me, which has also been difficult because my grandmother, who is a huge part of my life, she's also a huge alcoholic. And even though I was really blessed that my mom met up with my father who raised me, and he was a very big blessing in our lives, I struggled a lot growing up because of the influence of my grandmother. So in other words, even though my father had passed away, my grandmother, who to this day remains an alcoholic, there's still always been that influence and that, I guess, presence of it in my life. So just trying to turn those negative and constant ways of presence of alcohol. I mean, it's around all the time. Every time we have a family get together, lots of birthdays and graduations and just everything. Even at quinceañeras, it doesn't matter if it's a first year birthday, there's always alcohol there. And if you don't drink, everybody questions you, oh, ¿estás embarazada? Or, oh, what's wrong? Why aren't you drinking? And again, with the combination of healing arts with awareness and giving people an outlet for talking about it and educating themselves and promoting their own healing, just to move forward and not feel ashamed about it or anything like that.
I had no idea what it was like to struggle or know someone who struggles with alcoholism until recently, when I moved back with my grandmother, and my uncle also moved back in with my grandmother, and he also struggled with alcoholism when he lived in San Diego. So we knew that he had that struggle, and we knew that he had a past with it. But when he moved back in with my grandmother, we thought that it would be over. And then we started finding the bottles, because he was so intoxicated, he'd forget where he left all his stash, and we'd find bottles open. And he started to get really aggressive and verbally abusive with my grandmother. And I agree with what Claudia said about feeling like you're an alcoholic as well, because you're feeling those effects, that chaos that the alcoholism brings on. I felt like the only person who was going through this, who understood what was going on. It was a really dark and weird period. And, eventually my grandmother ended up getting very sick. And when she got sick with this crazy infection in her throat, it was just odd. And, a month later, many hospital beds later, I should say, she passed away.
Really end up making a person sick, and that really do end up, killing somebody. I know it's alcohol has also almost taken my father's life plenty of times, and I live with that fear. It's a lot easier said than done. It's something that comes and goes. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from the person. Other times you want to keep them close by so they're safe. But really finding that outlet when you're able to share something that's really hurting you, that's really deep, and making those connections with other people and sharing some of these stories is very rewarding for the mind, for the body, and the soul.
It's very difficult when we're dealing with addictions, it's very difficult, to make behavioral changes and feel support by ourselves in isolation. We need to be able to connect with other persons that are close to us, that we trust, to talk about, the problems, the issues that we're facing, the pain. How do we get rid of pain? And talking with another person helps a lot. And the person can be a friend, a relative, a therapist, a counselor. It can be groups of women, groups of men, support groups, where the person is not being judged, where the person is actually willing to risk being honest about who they are, and the group or the other person is not going to be judging them and punishing them for being who they are. The help that we need is all around us, and it's also internally, where we begin to forgive ourselves for having caused ourselves and others harm, and we begin to understand that for us to be healthy, we're going to make a lot of changes throughout our lives.
I remember my best friend Caroline. She asked me in college. She was like, "What did you like to play best when you were little?" And I thought about it for a second. I was like, "Oh, I loved being the mom, the teacher, and doctor. Like, those are my favorite things to pretend." And then she told me, "Well, usually what you liked to play when you were little is the most genuine expression of what may potentially interest you and fulfill you when you get older. I got the teacher thing down because I present and talk to people and can teach. I know that I'm a natural teacher. The doctor thing, midwifery and being a doula and being a healthcare provider. I'm a healthcare provider. That's so weird to say. I'm a healthcare provider. So those two things are like, yes, following my heart's desire. My other one, big one, is being a mom. And the female body, it just wakes up all these hormones, and like you see a baby, you start to feel like what a lot of women call like baby crazy. You're like, oh my god, my body, I'm like feeling all these I need to have a baby stuff. And mostly because I don't want to I want to be intentional about creating a child. And so to do that, I have to find someone who's also like intentional about creating a kid. I want to be able to help contribute to transforming the future through having children that I know I will be very conscious of how I teach them, like having a son or a daughter. Like I want whichever I'm blessed with, like I can help break the cycle, you know, and that means I have to constantly work on myself, and who doesn't? But then I think we don't often have the spaces to talk about that desire, you know. I think when I've expressed it, some have been like, oh, do you really want that responsibility? And some have been like, oh, be careful what you wish for. And as a midwife, I see the reality of having children. Like, it's very real to me how big of a choice that is. Like, I see it all the time, you know, and I understand it. I don't understand it the way being a mom understands it, but I get it. I'm like, that's a humongous responsibility. Even more so why I want to be intentional. And I'm empowered in that feeling. I think more women, maybe there are more women that have felt like they can't voice that desire and not have it shot down.
After my son was born, it just, I guess everything sort of hit me like a ton of bricks, as they say. It was, unfortunately, I don't feel like I had the best experience with my pregnancy. I didn't have a good actual birth experience. So there's a lot of that fear also in having another child.
I mean, the truth is that that's how OBs get trained in this country. They don't see natural birth, and a lot of times they're doing cesareans, and that is their comfort zone, you know. And so it's really important for women to choose their care providers carefully, and choose a care provider that fits with what you want. You know, you can't go to a hospital and just pick up any random doctor and say, I want a natural birth. If it's not something that they do, then you're kind of asking a lot from them. You know, so we have to know what we want and go get, you know, find somebody that provides that service. So there's a cesarean thing, that's a consequence, right? The unnecessary cesareans, really insensitive pap smears. That is one of the reasons that I want to be a nurse midwife, because as a CPM, I can't provide well women care. And I know that like 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual abuse, and pap smears can be very triggering, and they're a very important diagnostic tool. And so I want to be able to provide that service, like working with like a therapist or something, but doing like compassionate pap smears. Because that can change your life. Like once you have an awesome pap smear,
what is that possible?
It's so possible. It really is. I don't think that I will ever get a pap smear from a doctor ever again. I don't think that I can do that to myself. You know, having a midwife do your pap smear, a good midwife is going to explain every single little thing that is going to go on. Will offer you to hold the speculum so that you can feel in control. Will offer to show you your cervix so that you can see where you're going to dilate and where your baby's gonna exit from. Will stop whenever you say stop. Like that's really important, you know, for somebody who's experienced sexual abuse. To be in control. We need that.
You
So,
can give me a pap smear anytime.
That'd be weird. I have a friend who's a midwife and she does like wine nights at her house, and like they just hang out and she like everybody takes a turn and goes in the bedroom and gets a pap, and they're all just hanging out and drinking wine and having like pap night. So maybe I'll do a pap night for the next Hijas and STDS.
I'm sure that'll bring in a huge crowd. It will just be us.
Right? So, I mean, those are some solutions to some of those consequences is feeling empowered enough to say something, to advocate for yourself, to know that you love yourself enough to get what you want when it's important.
I think every day there are small victories that we can claim for ourselves. I think every day there's these little pivotal moments where you're like, that's what that means. That's what I'm supposed to. I can't believe I didn't think about that before. But I know there was a moment where I was breastfeeding and I thought, holy crap, like I sustained this life. I'm sustaining this life. And it's just such a common thing. Like, it's just, women have babies all the time, and pregnant women are walking around all the time. And there's a point maybe where it's too sacred, it's not sacred enough. Maybe 2-3 years ago, it just felt like nothing was ever going to be okay again. Everything just sort of felt like it was falling apart. My personal relationship, I didn't feel like I was able to be a good mom because I had to completely rely on everyone else to help me. I couldn't do a lot of things because of work. I couldn't do a lot of things for my son. I missed a lot of things him growing up because I couldn't be there. I was having problems with both of my parents. My sister and I were arguing all the time. I couldn't control my staff. We were losing business. And I just kept thinking, like, I can't handle anymore. Like, what else are you gonna throw at me? And then I had to like smack myself and say, okay, stop asking what else and start dealing with.
Talking earlier, right? So they always talk about how people were very free with their bodies before, you know, like there was less shame around nudity, or I don't know if Semeli has told you about how the Spanish didn't think that the Native women were human because they birthed without pain, and they were birthing without that, like, godly mandated, you will birth with pain. There's a passage in the Bible about it. And so they believed that Native people were not human, had like a different physiology, and then so we learned to birth with shame and with pain. You know, I mean, to the point where, yeah, like my grandmother didn't talk about sex or birthing with my mom. So my mom didn't know where babies came from. When she got married and she was 21, she still didn't know how she was going to have the baby. You know, she didn't know. and it wasn't okay to ask, and so that's also like a reclaiming, to try to find that knowledge and try to find the tools and techniques that people had to control their fears and mentally, but also to work with plants to support pregnancy and birth, to live in community, to support each other during pregnancy and early parenthood. So those are all things that are also like a decolonizing, de-shaming. So I'm very lucky that we live in a community where there are other people doing that kind of work and being that bridge and seeking that knowledge, and hopefully creating an environment where our children can grow with access to information and more confidence and openness and less fear.
If we started to look at motherhood in a different light, where it wasn't a burden, but rather something that can actually uplift the community, if the community nurtures it, more of our communities could transform, and so I see when I do become a mother, whenever that happens for me, I see that as adding to the community's health, and also like by being a mom and being a midwife and connecting with other moms, we can start to make some changes in our lives and in our communities. So that's why I want to be a mom. It's not so much only like, oh, I want one because like they're cute. Like, no. Yes, they are cute. Babies are adorable. I get to touch and hang out with them all day. They're awesome. And they're also an entire human life. And everything that you do to them from the minute that they are conceived impacts them so deeply, because we are who we are because of that. So my desire to be a mom is not irrational. It's like, I have to make certain choices to be true to myself, and that involves A, B, and C. I think for me, communicating, because I'm a writer, has always been important to me. I'm still working on it, but I've also gotten to the point where it's like Audre Lorde said, like, your silence will not protect you. It hasn't protected her. It hasn't protected a lot of women. So I think as a woman of color, politically, in this world and in my own life, communicating is a matter of my health and my life in a lot of respects, because I live in structures that have been designed to not give me a chance in the world, and I'm also around other people who are also working through their trauma. So communicating creates boundaries. I think your voice is your first boundary. Like how you speak and how you communicate your needs sets the stage for how other people are going to treat you, or how you act, or whatever the case may be. And as women, we're not necessarily taught that, because our needs are second to men globally.
And I could say it was the arts and the public libraries what really saved my life, what really gave me my self-esteem. But I definitely see myself, as a social artist. I would like to say I would like to advocate for art and literature through my own personal experience, that it could be a healing therapy. A lot of the concepts behind our project have came about. They're all about sharing. They're all about, whether it's confessing something, whether it's spreading a message, a positive message of love, of joy, or secretly sharing a message in a bottle that only you know what you wrote, letting that go, writing, sharing it, in the end really has an impact in how one, it has an impact in how you could feel, how you could start letting go of some of these pains, or you could just start sharing the love. You could start sharing your story with others, and that could have an impact in their life.
Being healthy is a natural condition. For a child to be born healthy, the mother and the father have to be healthy. Once we begin to develop as a human being, our health can take many paths, and it's up to the caregivers to make sure that children are healthy for the rest of their lives, at least when they're at home with a family. Healthy living is our responsibility, not just the person, but the caregivers, the family, the community. And Hijas de su Madre, the Hijas de su Madre Project, focuses on those issues that are important, for a healthy community, and uses the art, different art forms, to help us express our feelings about that.
That's the premise of what this project is trying to do, is begin those conversations that were once deemed hard to talk about. Bring them to light, talk about them. Let's examine what has been the consequences for not talking about them.